Happy to introduce to you Shanti Cheng, who's joining us just for a week from University of Melbourne in Australia. I think a long-time colleague of Betty's, or at least, yeah, I will let her talk about that if she wants to. But Shanti's work looks at, particularly at the digital journeys, digital lives of international students, and we thought that would be a topic that would be of interest to many of us here, so we asked him to speak on that topic today. Shanti's actual day job, I believe you're both a professor in the department and also the Associate Dean International, right, in the Engineering School. So I'll let him introduce himself further, but welcome Shanti to CIG and to Boston College. We brought the weather for you.
Thank you. Yes.
We're happy to be here.
I think he brought the weather.
Yeah, he brought it with him. Yeah, probably.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And it's really lovely because we originally talked about me visiting for my sabbatical, and then I didn't get my sabbatical, and I was saying to Betty, oh well, too bad. And then there was the opportunity to come here because coincidentally, you guys were hosting the Council of International Schools last week, and I went, right. Since they're paying for me to come here, I'm going to stay on for a few days, and then we can do this. So it's a lovely coincidence. Things happen when you're a good person. And so the presentation today is always a bit different because when I present to schools of education, you'll notice that I come from a school of computing and information systems. Now, the first question I'm going to ask you is, when was the last time you spoke to someone from a school of engineering and IT if you were not working with them in your research and your studies? Okay, right. So that's the typical response that we get when we talk to people in education. And if we ask the same question to my colleagues in IT, when was the last time they spoke to someone from education, they'll glaze, their eyes will glaze over because they'll say, you mean like engineering education? Like engineering education design? Beyond that, there isn't a lot of interaction. So it's always interesting for me to learn across the disciplines. So there are going to be things that I talk about here that's quite a bit different and a different approach. It's a mishmash, as we call it. And I'll talk a little bit also about some research methodologies that we use, some issues that we've come across in the work that we've done. Does that sound all right? Mm-hmm. Betty, did you want to say anything?
Well, I knew that. I've known Shanti for probably over 20 years.
Yeah.
Easily over 20 years. And in that time, I've seen him move into a number of different roles. So I think, well, one of the things that I enjoy working with, well, I know one of the things I really enjoy about working with Shanti is that he brings this different range of perspectives, and it's always different. So, you know, he's coming to class this evening to the Teaching and Global Perspectives on Teaching and Learning class, and he'll be talking differently there. And then we're going to Heather's class on Student Affairs, and I think you'll see that what you get is a very rich kind of perspective, various perspectives on this topic. And I have to say that I was very surprised when he moved into, suddenly he was in computer and information systems. And I thought, this is going to be interesting to see how this fits, the culture fits. But I suspect that you've changed the culture as much as the culture has changed you, or more than.
Yeah. It is interesting working with IT people and engineers, and you might see that as I go along. Yeah, interesting. It's a nice way to put it. So the topic is digital journeys and international students. When I talk about digital journeys, it's a concept that I pulled together from after years of doing research in this space. And I pulled it together at my last sabbatical when I was based in Minnesota. And I was sitting there thinking through, how do I bring all of this together? What does this all mean to me? So what I want to do today is to show you the disparate areas of work that we're involved in, and then how it came together to talk about digital journeys. I always like to start with the real world, right? And Betty has seen this previously, but I wanted to show this to you again. How is the world changing? We talk a lot in the research that we do in education, for example, around the student experiences, the curriculum. But the other space that's sometimes forgotten is the digital space. If you think about what's happening in the digital space, this diagram shows us what happens every minute, right? Grubhub receives more than 8,500 orders every minute of the day. That's a lot of food being delivered, right? Instagram users post 55,000 more or more photos every minute of the day. And yet, some people still call this digital space a virtual space, a virtual reality. It is not virtual. We're doing it so many hours of the day. You know, your iPhones will tell you you are using your phone on average 7 hours a day, right? How is that virtual, right? Further evidence that it's no longer virtual, Tinder users swipe nearly 1.5 million times every minute of the day, right? So let's...
Clearly while they're at work.
Yeah, work must be really fulfilling, right? So if you think about all this is happening. Yet, sometimes when I look at research in the education space, there's hardly any talk about how this is impacting on the work that we're doing, right? But I want to share something else with you. Have a look at this. This is every minute in China, okay? Now, I spoke to a few of you who are from China. Every 60 seconds, which is a minute, WeChat publishes 486 articles. Weibo, netizens browse how many Weibo? 1.6 million Weibo. QQ sends out more than 11 million messages every minute of the day, right? My next question for you is, if you're not familiar with China, right, how many of these have you heard of? 1, 2, 3, maybe, right? So it's not very common for a lot of people to know. And then you start to see, how are these people interacting across cultures, right? And so this is the issue that we deal with. What does this all mean? You think about the discussion, the political discussion now in the UK and in the US, and to another extent also in Australia, around how voters are very divided, and around how people are living in their own bubbles, as we call it, right? There's research that's come out of this word, calling people digital natives. Have you heard of this term, digital natives? Right? The idea that there's a group of young people who inhabit this digital space, right? The person who coined this term, Mark Prensky, has come out to say, please do not use this term. It's a terrible term, and it's terribly misleading. But the rest of the world loves it. You know, once you create something and you birth it out and you give it to the world, it has a life of its own, right? So this idea that the digital natives, the people of the world, right? They have achieved high rates of digital literacy, and they're globally aware and connected. They love technology, and they can be self-serving and self-focused. Have you heard these things before about millennials and digital? Okay. Here's what the research actually shows. Digital literacy is really patchy, and most people don't know how to use the digital information beyond Google. Right? It's even scarier when there's research telling us that some young people and older people don't go beyond the first page or the first 3 links that Google provides. How's that digital literacy? How do we talk about digital literacy in the age of global citizenship? If we think that global citizenship is about people looking at different perspectives and thinking about all the differences, how does looking at only the first 3 links of Google support that development? These are things that we need to think about, right? When you're looking for an answer, and I'm not thinking, you know, places to eat near me, I'm thinking as you are on the tram or on the T and you're looking for some answers, you are usually looking for the first 2 links, and off you go, right? There's a term for that, we call it satisficing. Close enough is good enough.
That's one of those words.
Have you heard of that word?
Satisficing,
yeah.
No.
You can blame Gregor Kennedy and a few other people. This word has been around for 30 years, it's just not very common. Satisficing, that means the close enough is good enough. Does that make sense? Yeah. I didn't make that up, okay? So digital literacy is actually quite patchy, okay? The second one is that engagement with social media is quite diverse, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. And if you look at the previous slides, you know, you look at how people are using different platforms. It is so diverse, right? Social networks are mainly based on real-world networks. Our research tells us that don't think that people actually go out their way to find people all over the world to expand their consciousness and their global citizenry. People actually look for people who are like them. How many of us have unfriended enough of our own family circles so there's only the people that we like? Right? Think about that. All right? How is that promoting the expansion of your horizons? All right? Okay. They do love technology. Young people do love technology because they've been born into a world where technology is so much a part of their life. Right? And they do participate in all sorts of online social campaigns. Then the last one, they can be self-serving or self-focused. Yeah, it's only because they're teenagers. Okay, teenagers since the dawn of time have been self-serving and self-focused. So the research on digital natives that focus on teenagers and calling them self-serving and self-focused is like, and? Right? It just so happens that today's teenagers, unfortunately, have got digital, I guess, artifacts to capture how self-serving and how self-focused they are. If we had the same tools in the 70s and 80s, good luck to some of us who are sitting here. Right? The whole point is the technology didn't turn them self-serving and self-focused. Them being teenagers is what led to it. Okay? So these are some of the things that we have to think about in terms of when we are thinking about education, when we think about students, how does it actually impact on what it is that we are saying about the students? Does that make sense? All right. So I wanted to turn back to the whole Brexit and Trump and all that, right? This idea of a digital echo chamber, right? So this is the bubble, that we all live in a bubble. Now, there's some work done by the Knight Foundation report that says that, you know, there are people talking about echo chambers and filter bubbles, but really it's a minority, okay? Of course, that's been questioned because of their methodology and who they talk to. Because in the same year this was published, in 2018, there was another interesting report that was funded by the same group of people, and this is what they found, that they're focused on Black Twitter, Asian Twitter, and feminist Twitter. Have you heard of this term? Right? This is kind of like, you know, I don't want to listen to what CNN says, or I don't want to listen to what Fox and Friends say. So I block them all out, so I've got my own type of Twitter. And it says that participants bypass mainstream media as a news source. Not a surprise. And some community members use Twitter as a curated news source, right? So we curate the things we want to listen to, right? For self-protection, if nothing else. Right? And participants tend to share news content that covers their community's high visibility because we want our voice heard. Right? And so you've got the contested space of, do we have echo chambers? Do we not have echo chambers? Right? Now we think about our own international students, right, who are in our classes when we are teaching them. And for me, that's a lot of students because I have 80% of my students are international students from 80 different countries. And if I start to think about echo chamber in there, I would go nuts, right? So the question is, how do we work with that sort of situation? The work of Priest and Snyderman, these are the rock stars of the research world where I come from in social media. They talk about the fact that not everyone is equal in social media. So you've got these four kind of groups of people. You can sort of self-select which one you are. So you've got the readers and members, they kind of just read and browse. Right? Unless you have Google Analytics, you wouldn't even know they were there. Okay? You've got contributors. These are people who feel like I need to like so that people know I was here, like a footprint. All right? Then you've got the collaborators. These are the people who share. They share a lot. Okay? They don't particularly create any new content, but they're always sharing with friends, right? They collaborate. And then you've got the leaders, the people who promote, mentor, govern, and create new content. All right, I'm going to get you to self-identify. How many of you think you might be a reader? Yeah, how many of you think you might be a contributor? How many of you think you're a collaborator? How many of you think you're a leader? Okay. In Australia, the answer is we are all up here. All right? At least here you've got a range. This is what I call these people. It's an easier way to remember them. Lurkers, likers, linkers, leaders. Okay? And I've actually shared this with Priest and Snyderman. They said, oh, we could change it. So yeah. Australia, for example, is a nation of lurkers. Okay? It's different. Different countries have got a different profile, if you like. The Indonesians, for example, are a nation of likers and linkers. Okay? And so they are world famous for sharing fake news. They just like everything and share everything where there is no filter, right? So you've got all this, it's not the same all over the world, right? So
Chantal,
yeah.
a question.
Yes.
Aren't we all a bit of all? Some people would be a bit of all.
Some people are a bit of all, but to get to this, it's kind of like the hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
right? We all have to eat. But some of us are actually more self-actualized than others. I'm not saying that if you're down here, you're more self-actualized. I'm just saying that we all have a bit of everything, but there's a tendency for what we tend to do with our time. Some of us never do this. Right. Some people are exclusively up there. The people here will at some point have to be up there as well. Yeah. Okay. But what does this have to do with our classrooms and our students? If we think about international education, and we think about the use of social media and technology in higher education, we have to start thinking, are our groups of students interacting with each other? Are they socializing digitally? Right? Because socializing is not just face-to-face socialization. We talk about the creation of a campus space, we talk about the creation of classroom environments and all that. And then there is a lack of discussion around technology and education and what it means for the students who are quite different in their behaviors. Right? Because at least in the classroom, when you see people of different cultures, you can encourage them to talk to each other. Right? Those of us who do work in internationalization of the curriculum build social engineering processes into curriculum to make sure people talk. And then you put things online and you have discussion forums where it's like, oh well, it should happen the same way. But it doesn't, because people go towards their natural tendency, if you like. Yeah? And that's the beauty and the horror of digital technology. It accentuates what you like and your natural predilections. Yeah. And then the question that we get asked in IT and in education is, if there is so much information out there, why aren't we more educated as a society, right? So this next one is about understanding information science. This is my favorite slide. It's work that we did about 8 years ago. And we were trying to understand this question: if there's so much information out there, why aren't we more educated or informed as a society? We were not just interested in social issues, we were even interested in quite fundamental issues like your own health. If you were looking for health information, for example, right? And so we tried to understand how humans dealt with information. And this is the typology that we came up with. It's the idea that we all have information needs, right? There's an assumption that we all have information needs, and we act on those needs. Because we think we're missing some information, we go look for that information. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. No. We do more than that. Okay? So we start to understand what is information needs. Okay, the first thing is you have to recognize this need. Some of us don't recognize the need. Right? There are some information needs that we recognize, like, oh, I think I'm hungry. I need to find out where I can eat around here. That's a recognized need. All right? What about unrecognized information needs? I'll give you one. Do you all know the escape routes or the escape routes out of this building in an emergency? No. Some of you work in this office, all right. But you don't recognize it until it happens, right? There are many things in our lives for which we don't have recognized information needs. When you're in international education and when you move to another country, it is easy to say, because you're a sojourner, you will identify all these areas for which you need information. But it is just as common for you not to know what you need to know. You don't know what you need to know. Does that make sense? Right? For example, trying to work out how to pay for the T system, the transport system here, zone 1, zone 1A, 1, 2, 3, what the hell is going on here? So pardon my language, and there's nowhere on any of the signs does it tell me what it is, and then you're using your limited, iPhone with no data plan to try and figure it out, you kind of give up, right? So you don't know you need that information. So there's recognized needs and unrecognized needs as well, right? It happens a lot in education and happens a lot in health. If you have an unrecognized need, you are less likely to go and find that information because you didn't know you needed it until it's too late, for example. That's the recognition. Then there's demand and undemanded. Demand assumes that you recognize there's a need and you go ask for it, you go seeking it. Undemanded is you choose to do nothing about it. All right? So let's put it into perspective. The red group, recognized and demanded information needs. This is a group of students, if you like, who recognize that some information is missing and they need to go and figure it out. They need to go and find it, right? Whether this is on their learning management systems, whether this is about the curriculum, or just everyday living. That's a very easy group to deal with because they'll come and ask for help. How many of your students actually come and do that? Yeah? A few, right? Is it a majority? No, right? All right, now let's look at the green group. Recognized and undemanded. These are people who recognize, okay, I think I need some information. But for whatever reason, they choose not to act on it. Okay? Have you ever had students who it's kind of like, okay, clearly we've given them feedback on their assignment and it shows that they're not doing well, but they're still not coming to you to ask for help. Because they'd rather put it off, because until you tell them you're in trouble, they're not going to do anything about it. Does that make sense? All right? So you've got recognized and undemanded information needs. So just because you realize you need some information doesn't mean you'll do anything about it. Right? Think about what that means for education. Think about what that means when you're marking students' work. Think about what that means when group work doesn't work out well for international students and domestic student engagement. Right. In health, it occurs quite a bit to people who you're trying to encourage to quit smoking. Okay? I don't smoke. The example for me here is bacon. I love bacon, sorry. But there's nothing in the world that's going to make me look at a site that tells me about the nutritional value of bacon. I know it'll kill me if I eat too much of it, but I don't. No. Just no. All right? So that's an example that I can give you. All right. Then you've got this one, unrecognized and demanded information needs. Unrecognized but demanded. All right? Have you ever had students come to you and after 15 minutes, you still don't know why they're there? But what is it that you want? Okay, this happens when sometimes ourselves, we go online and we are browsing for something. We're not quite sure what it is until we see it, right? That's because we do not have the keywords to articulate our need. We don't have a recognition of what is it. Okay, just a general uncomfortableness. I'm not sure what's going on until I see the keyword. Unfortunately, Google requires a keyword, and you don't have a keyword, you're like browsing for hours. Right? It's the same with those students. They're just coming to you to try and figure out what is it. So they're actually asking for help without knowing what it is they're needing. So you've got this group. And finally, don't know, don't care, unrecognized, undemanded. Okay, if we put everything online, in our learning management systems, and we build wonderful curriculum that's engaging and all that. Which group will that appeal to? The red group. Fantastic. What about the others? Well, they're students at Boston College. They should know better. They should just all be red. Does that happen?
How does the cost of finding the information play in here? Because like finding information on health insurance, for instance, in the US is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is that really simple?
Really?
How do you compare? How do you actually work it out, right? But that's assuming that you understand that if you don't find the information, it could be even worse, right? So in education, if you've got the top students from all over the world coming to your university, what is the most basic assumption that these students have around the information? I've made it. I've made it to Boston College, so I'm a good student. I know what it takes to survive in an education system.
I've been successful.
I've been successful, right? So in their minds, they're all reds. Okay? So this is the issue that we're dealing with. Right? So now I want to share with you some practicalities as well as we keep going. Differences in digital environments between home and host country. Here's an example of a Japanese website. Isn't it fabulous? Can you imagine if I translated this into English? So it's in English, but this is the layout. How would you feel about it?
Assaulted.
Assaulted, yeah. This is better. Lots of pictures with big words. This is Turkish. The South Asians use this type of interface too. This is Korean. So cute.
Yeah.
Doesn't appeal to you even if it was in English. And this is Chinese eBay. Imagine if it was in English. It would still be bad, do you think? But the Chinese don't think so. They spend a lot of money on this. Right? I'm going to try something a bit, I hope this works. The next slide. I'm going to show you a live performance. Okay, how do I, what have I done?
Cut instead of copy. Paste it. Did Mac help?
I'm just from the School of Computing and Information.
Let the lurker help you out.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that fantastic?
Did you cut it?
I thought I copied it. This is the perfect time for you to refill on pizzas. That's okay. I can find the website.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, how do I?
There you go. So Joe knows all of that. Another piece of pizza because we don't have fewer people here.
Okay. Totally Okay.
Got it?
Okay. All right. So I've shown you the different websites, right, of different cultures and what people are used to, and you think about what that means. This is the website of Wuhan University in China. There's nothing particularly different. It's, you could replace Boston College and different pictures and all that. All right. So that's the English version. I'm going to go and have a look at the Chinese version. Can you see up there? It says Chinese version. I'm clicking on it. Do Do you see a difference suddenly? Even if it was in English, all right? Now it's detected that we're in Boston, and it's going to use the big picture again. Okay? All right? You can start to see a difference, right? So what am I saying here? What am I talking about in terms of what it means for, let me just,
From current slide.
oops.
Cancel. You go up on the left, at the top.
On the left,
From current slide, it's a big button.
I'm missing the button.
Right there.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the reason why I showed you that is, okay, I'm not saying Boston College needs to have 5 different websites in different languages at all. Just showing you that there are different roadmaps in the online digital space, right? And this means that the assumption that students, first of all, can identify what information they're missing, and then they can go and look for it, and that they can find it. Because to us, our own website, it's fine, a few clicks and you're there. So the funny thing is the number of times I've given this presentation to universities and the staff going, oh no, we can't even find things on our own website. And you go, well, can you imagine the students, if it's a different roadmap, if it's laid out completely differently, and it's in a different language, right? So what does this mean when we are building curriculum? What does this mean when we are showing students what they need in order to thrive, not just succeed, but also to thrive? How does that help intercultural interaction? Remember earlier on I talked about, it's about convenience, it's about what we're used to, it's about our own echo chamber. It is a lot easier for students sometimes to find help for their homework with their friends from back in Singapore. Does that make sense? How is that helping intercultural interaction? Right? So these are things that we deal with. These are things that we start to question. How can we understand this better? So that we talk about this term. Finally, halfway through the presentation, I talk about digital journeys. So the first assumption that people make around internationalization and international students is that you travel across half the world to come to a new environment. So we are very focused on the physical journey. They're here now. We need to have transition. We need to have face-to-face interaction, all that, right? But remember I said the digital world is no longer virtual, it's part of our world. So even though you've made a physical transition or journey, what about the digital journey? Now, what is a digital journey? We don't say in the digital journey that you then abandon all your old sources of information and now you should use all the Bostonian websites. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying in the digital space is you need to expand your digital portfolio, your bundle of information sources. So you're now not just reading newspapers from your home country, but also the local newspapers to find out what's going on here. So many students don't. So many of us don't when we travel the world. Okay, what's the local newspaper here? Yeah, see, I've been here a week. I'm still reading the BBC and The Age in Australia. Okay? When we did our research with students, there are students who get all their information about their home country from their source country. From their home country. How scary is that? And we're talking about global citizenship in the classroom, but then the moment they leave the classroom, they're like, it's almost like they've gone back to their home country in the digital space, right? And so unless you are in that red group that says, I need to break out of this mold, right? Then you are going to be in the convenience group, which is what works, because I've got to get this assignment done. So the digital journey piece helps us to understand that the digital piece and the digital experience is just as important as the physical experience. That if we are thinking about putting things online, we have to recognize this, right? So just a little bit on the research that we did. I mean, we did a lot of focus groups across Australia, the Netherlands, and here in the US as well. We did a survey of six, it's a very strange number, 6699, so you can't forget, it makes it easier for us to remember. 6699 international students responded, right? And what's really fascinating about that piece of survey, I mean, it was a massive survey, and the best result that I can share with you that's really quite interesting is this. We gave students the option to tell us a little bit about their social networks, the nature of their social networks, and we gave them options. Like, most of my friends are people from my home country. Most of my friends are people from the host country, so in Australia for example. I have a mix of home and host. Most of my friends are Australians of a similar cultural background to me, okay? Or I have mostly international student friends from different countries, right? And finally, I have no friends.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Right? Out of 6699, 280 students told us I have no friends. Okay, just to be aware, I mean, like, if I broke it down and I gave you a percentage number, it doesn't mean anything, but when I say 280 lives, it's a bit different, right? It's real. And what was really interesting was that most of the groups had between 4 to 5 sources of information for any given thing, whether it's news, accommodation, studies, right? However, if your friends are from the same country as you, you have 4 or fewer sources of information. And when your friends are a mix of domestic and international students, you have 11 or more sources of information. Right. That's really fascinating, isn't it? And it makes so much sense to understand that the more diverse your social group is, you could be using Facebook and WeChat. And so the sources of the curated information are coming from different perspectives. And you have to deal with that. But if all your friends were from India, then you're just getting Indian sources, 4 or fewer. Right? So this tells us that the idea of digital journeys is very real. What does it mean? It actually has an impact, or it is not just that it impacts on your self-identity, but your own self-identity impacts on your digital journey, right? In the focus groups that where we talk to students, we found that students who are coming on this international education experience, wanting to break out of the cultural mold, right, are more likely to make more friends from different cultures. Whereas those who are seeing it as, I must preserve my cultural identity, tend to not, and tend not to read beyond what they're familiar with. Right? We have a whole chapter there in the NAFSA book on self-identity. The online tribes, who are my people? Right? When they come, we do a whole lot of stuff around orientation and transition to make sure that they've got local friends. But do they have online friends here as well? That's another one that's missing, because if you ask them to leave their friends back home, they need new friends here, in the online space as well. Otherwise, they could be sitting in this room with your multicultural classroom and be on WeChat with their friends back home. Mm-hmm. Right? Not to say they should abandon. Remember, this is not abandoning the all sources, it's about expanding your sources of information, because that's what we want. Right? And then when it comes down to the diversity of students, recognizing different skill levels, attitudes, perspectives, tolerance for ambiguity. If they're finding it hard to navigate your sources of information, like your website, because they're not used to it, then they're going to give up, right? Because one of the things that we do at orientation for international students is to take them around these other places to eat, right? Now, if I were to tell you that in the digital space, it's almost like giving them a new roadmap as well. This is how we lay out our websites. Can you imagine? You're actually helping the students from all over the world understand how websites are laid out differently. sometimes when I give talks like this, I get people to work in groups of 3 or 4, and I ask them all to go and try and buy KFC from different countries, right? Then I would use examples like Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Singapore, Australia. And when they all bring it up on their mobile, the layout is completely different too. Even the pictures, some have no pictures, some are all just words, right? So we have the unconscious bias here in terms of how we use websites. When I talk to my Chinese students about this, they go, oh my God, you are so right, because when we first came and we look at all these Australian websites, it's all just big blue pictures with no information. So useless. Right? So it took them a while to understand how our sites are, our corporate blue website. Melbourne Uni, everything is blue, even my slides. So, making the journey talks about convenience and comfort zone, right? Can people go through, when they are pressed for time, can they find the information really quickly? Safety and trust, do they trust the online sites that they see here, right? Is the online community there? There is real emotional attachment to websites. This is sad, but it's true, right? Most people use between 5 to 8 websites over and over again. That includes their work website, their news source, their 1 or 2 entertainment source, and they keep going back. There's an emotional attachment. If I tell you I'm going to shut it down, people are outraged. Right? That's real emotional attachment. So you're asking students to move and expand, right? Devices and platforms. How do your websites look on different devices and platforms? Yeah, and whether or not they have the digital skills. Remember at the start I said digital skills is pretty patchy. Okay? People look for what's convenient. I've got this here. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'll leave it here so that if people want to have a look at it, they can. This is an example of a project that we did recently. It's called Contact Points, enabling international students during critical incidents. So this is at that pressure point where their lives could be in danger. And we try to understand whether they have the information to survive. All right, are you ready? So the first one, the principles is to understand international students' information seeking and encountering behaviors. What you don't need to know is as important as what you need to know. So now we're putting all the research that we have into real applied research. Students need to understand both the context and the language of the messages. Messages have to be refined for clarity, and data saturation rules apply, right? So the idea is that we went to emergency services and asked them, well, emergency services like the fire brigade and all that, the lifesavers, and we asked them, what are the key messages you want to share with international students that we can put on social media so that they are all safe, right? So they came up with 20 messages, and we took it out to the students and asked them, do you understand these messages? And some of them look at us blankly. I'll give you examples, okay? Here, call 000 in an emergency. Now, if you're Australian, this makes sense. It makes sense to you, right?
Yeah.
Call 000 in an emergency. What does that mean to the rest of you?
Similar to here, just different digits. 999 here.
Yeah, 999?
911. 999 UK. I just moved from there.
Well, there you go. This is really important.
Because I would probably do the wrong one.
I would have done 999.
Because that's the UK.
Mm-hmm.
911 here.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? At least the students who come to the United States have a fighting chance, because they'll remember that they watched something on TV that told them the number is 911, because everybody watches American shows, right? But Australia is 000. It's like, what snowball chance in hell do they have of trying to get that number? So many Australians call 911 that now 911 diverts to 000. For Australia, right? But so this is the thing. This is what students told us. What type of emergency are you talking about? Right? So we say, not doing your homework is not an emergency, that you should call 000. And some of these kids are quite young, right?
Not being able to find your way home.
Not being able, the panic, anxiety, okay? Then they ask, but what's the number for the police? Because in different countries, you might call a different number for whether it's the police, the emergency, or the fire brigade. Or they'll call 999, or 111, which is New Zealand, right? So every country is a bit different. So at that point, when you need it, this message doesn't work, right? Such a simple message, call 000 in an emergency. So we had to workshop that. Now I'm putting on my glasses and tell you what the final message is. The final message is call 000 for any emergency, ambulance, fire, or police. Okay, then we've taken out all the possible permutations of what's going on here out of it and said, this is what it is, right? Then we had the situation, the next message is, make sure you are safe before you call the police. Safe. And first it's like, run into a shop. What if the shop is closed? Look for a well-lit place. What if there's no well-lit place? So how do you actually get all these messages across different cultures, context, and language ability, right? The next one I want to share with you is this one. Do not leave valuables in a public space, and the students told us, yeah, we don't. The library is not a public space, it's a school space. It's the college. Right? That's where they lose all their laptops. Right? Because if you go to Singapore, you just leave your laptop anywhere, and nobody steals it. So for us, it's about understanding, when we do research, the digital ecologies, okay? And when we talk about digital ecologies in international education, here are some of the terms. Information needs and motivations, that we cannot assume that we are all on the same page. That needs can be active, that means recognized or unrecognized. And often in a classroom, there's a lot of unrecognized, unspoken truths. Okay? And what's the motivation? Information topics of interest and discussion. People talk about topics and discussion points quite differently, right? Concepts are different. Next one, information context to help understanding. So the examples I gave you are all contextual. We have another one I should share with you. Swim between the flags. In Australia, swim between the flags. Every child, you must swim between the flags.
Otherwise, what will happen to you? A shark might come and get you.
Yeah.
You might drown.
You might drown. The reef will take you out.
Yeah.
And we'll never see you again. Happened to one of our prime ministers.
Yeah. So,
what is it? So our international students looked at us the same way you guys are looking at us, and we're sharing all this information. For 25 years, international students in Australia have been told swim between the flags. And this is the first time we realize they have no idea what we're telling them. Because like you guys have no idea what I'm telling you. If you came to Australia, swim between the flags. Yeah?
Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing.
no, that's a real thing.
All Ecologies tell me to watch out for the drop bears.
No. This will save your life. At the beach, okay, there is orange and yellow flags that denotes a safe space for you to swim. So always swim between those flags. Now I can't put all that into social media, no one's gonna share it.
But it's safe for a particular reason as well.
Yeah.
It's safe because there's a lifeguard watching
As well.
to see.
Yeah.
So it's unsafe for two reasons. To swim outside the flags. There will be a danger.
Yeah,
there will be a
there'll be
danger. There'll be a rip or something.
A rip, yeah.
So if you don't know all of that, some people think, oh, there's a lot of people swimming between those flags, and there's no one swimming over there.
So I'll just go there.
I'll just go there because I'm a good swimmer.
Right. So if you watch Bondi Beach, the Bondi Rescue, I don't know if you have that, that's what happens to all the tourists basically, and international students. Right? But our international students are saying, what, you mean all the swimming pools here have got Australian flags? Right? So this is the contextual understanding of what we're doing in international education that we don't always think about. information format for usability. In what format do students like information? That's another one. And different cultures have different preferences. And channels for accessibility. So that goes to my very first slide, where I show you all the Chinese social media platforms and channels. Right? So it's not just Facebook, for example, or Instagram. Yeah. And that information behaviors exist. Sorry about the UK spelling. But information behaviors.
But it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. It includes information seeking, encountering, sharing, avoiding, hoarding, sharing. Sorry, I got sharing twice. I must really like it. And satisficing. Right? So this is how we behave with information. Is there any that you don't understand?
What's hoarding?
Hoarding. Some of us like to keep information.
To yourself.
Yeah. And we like, we'll keep it, we'll collect it. But we
Save
don't do
all your
anything with it.
emails. Save all your
Save all
emails.
your emails.
We
Yeah.
have to do that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So how many of you is your email your filing system?
Yeah.
Nothing is ever deleted. And encountering is you don't go looking for it, but it comes to you, and it's quite serendipitous. And in that one, the more diverse your social network, the more diversity of information you get, right? Because if you just rely on seeking, good luck. Right? It's the same in the classroom and in international education. I've got 5 minutes. Okay, so a lot of this has to deal with unconscious bias. We talk about unconscious bias as well. Okay, and now you have to think, what does this have to do with international education? How does understanding all these things impact on your practice in international education? Yeah.
Well, like, my field experience was with the international office here in BC, and they're looking at opening a WeChat account.
Right.
Because such a big portion of the international student
Yeah.
population is Chinese.
Yeah.
And rather than surf the BC OSS website, they just search it on WeChat
Yes.
instead.
Yes. Yeah. And in the early days, people would panic about that. Like, should that be allowed? It should be on the official kind of, Facebook. But you can make an official WeChat, right?
That's what they're looking
Yeah.
into.
One of my ex-students and alumni now actually officially runs about 20 different Australian universities' WeChat channel for them.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so they help
There's a
to
career.
translate all the information that's needed to go out to students into Chinese as well. It goes out WeChat, and it drives traffic back to our terrible website. But it provides contextual information for why this is important as well. Yeah.
For where it needs to be found.
Yeah. Yeah, and where to find it and how to find it and
Yeah.
how to use it. Yeah.
I was thinking, I'm sorry if I'm mischaracterizing your presentation, but for the most part, I was thinking that the unit of analysis is the individual, along with it, the culture that he or she comes from. But that might not be as useful as using the type of information as a unit of analysis, because one individual might behave differently towards different kinds of information. For instance, I would rather just wait and accept the consequences rather than go find information about health insurance.
Yeah, yeah.
But not about housing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is why. So you are on the ballpark because it's both. It's both. So on the one hand, you can look at it from the individual and groups of people from particular cultures as one unit of analysis. The other one is actually the type of information. This is why this slide is about the type of information. So for example, when I showed you that 2 by 2, the recognized, unrecognized, I say this to people, right? When you build a website, you are not just appealing to the red corner. You have to appeal to 3 of the corners, the red, the green, and the yellow. So how do you build information and present information that will appeal to the greens and the yellows?
Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
I think that, for me, is really key.
So it's a bit back. That one.
That one.
Yeah.
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 That, for me, is really key for people working in student affairs as well.
Yeah.
See that, Austin? How, it's the it's the yellow.
Yeah. People have asked me,
green
what do
that
we
we're trying to
do?
get to.
What do we do? Okay, the traditional websites that we build are very focused on the red group, right? Very focused on the red group. So your point, it's not about the cultures in this one. This is about how people of different cultures, remember that the complexity is that people have different recognition of different needs, right? But the issue here is how do you motivate the Greens to use the information on your website? So the Greens, right? So this is what we call clickbait. It's really important, right? We have suggested to website developers that you need to put headings like housing.
What you need to know in order to succeed at Boston College.
No, it's like, have you ever had problems with a landlord? Right? Employment. Are you looking for part-time work?
Right.
Right? So this is to activate the Greens.
Yeah.
Because they recognize what they need, but they feel completely unmotivated to go and find accommodation, housing, employment rights. It's like, oh my gosh. Right? This one, the yellows, is where we work a lot with human-computer interaction designers, that we put all the keywords up front. Here are all our services, and here's how they are all linked. Not you have to use a search term and use drop-down boxes that I don't even know what I need. So I need it on one page to see, oh, you have all of this. Because we have students go through their entire time at university not knowing that we actually have a health services division. So, yeah. This group, they're not coming to your website. You need to go and talk to them face to face. And you need to rely on peer education for this group. And that comes to the social media piece as well. So from this point of view, your question is very relevant. This is no longer about culture, but recognizing that different cultures will have different types of reds and greens. That makes sense.
And that it will vary on the need, as you were saying. I'm much more likely to search for things that affect Anna than things that affect me. If it's me, I'm like, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
No, I need to figure out this health issue with you right now.
Yeah.
I think this is really interesting also to think about how we put everything up on a website, and we know that websites are not static and don't need to be static, but they tend to be quite static. And so with students, we know that when they first arrive, they're mostly likely to be most interested in housing and making friends and health and settling in, knowing where to get their food, knowing where to get their, that sort of stuff. And we put that there, and then we leave it there, and then we do something else over here, whereas a website that actually feeds information through, that you see banners and those sorts of things.
Yes.
But we still tend to think we just put it up there and we've got our job is done.
Yeah.
But what's the saying? The saying is the job is not done.
No.
And actually the unrecognised and undemanded are really the people most at risk, aren't they?
Yeah. And the way that we deal with this, that we've talked to international student services, is you need to map out the life cycle, the study life cycle of a student throughout the year, right? When is the high pressure period? You need to drip feed information out saying, hey, by the way, wellness and well-being during the time when all your assignments are due, maybe come and talk to us.
Week 6 might be
Yeah,
that time.
right? Week 4 might be when people miss home, so you send out strategic information. And once you've mapped it all out, right, you just press play. You don't have to okay, what do I do now? The work has to be done in planning for the whole year, what information goes out when. The worst websites and the worst social media channels is those that are controlled by marketing. All right? So every 2 weeks, we have a Master of Environmental Management program that you might be interested in enrolling in. We have a Master of International Education that is fantastic. It's like, seriously, nothing about that community building, which is what the students are looking for. So I think it's really important to
They're just doing the website now. And social media.
Everything. But yeah. I think I'm out of time.
Yeah, well,
could go
that
on
was
for another
terrific.
hour.
And it's always a good sign when a discussion gets to a point that you don't want to go.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
I'm
very
going to be
much.
around tomorrow morning.